So, hello and welcome to our RayPack Studio webinar and live from our new headquarters in Paderborn. So my name is Lara Eding. I'm responsible for the product management area and would like to guide you through the webinar together with my colleague Marcin Otoroski.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Marcin. I'm Head of Products and Innovations at RayNet, contributor to MSIX packaging community, developer of RayPack Studio, and I'm going to take the majority of presentation today, showing what kind of cool stuff we did in RayPack 7.1.
That's true. Okay, just one information from my side for this webinar. So all participants are on mute. If you have questions, so please feel free and use the chat function. But we have also a Q&A session, so we can use this time as well. As I already said, we would like to present you today RayPack Studio and also, of course, the new feature highlights of 7.1. And to get more into detail, we have prepared a live demo and as well, as I mentioned, the Q&A session. First of all, I would like to give you some insights or some introduction about RayPack Studio. So RayPack Studio provides a set of software components for professional enterprise software packaging. And one of the components is RayQC Advanced, and that provides automated compatibility tests for environments and operating systems. For especially Windows 11, the new operating system at the moment. But Marcin, you would present us some more details. And as well, RayEval. RayEval is for generating professional documentations and descriptions of each installation step, and that's fully automated. And of course, the big component and the heart of RayPack Studio is RayPack. So RayPack is for the creation of software packages in several formats like MSIX, FV, pack layering, MSI. So there we have also more details later. But RayPack has also a direct integration into our package store. So there you can use complete pre-configured software packages and you can work with them as well. And finally, RayQC, which is a rule-based tool for the creation and execution of package test criteria with simple checklists. And all these components allow you to have a simple and fast packaging process. And now I think it's time to go more deeper and give you some news and insight into our solution.
So right now I'm going to take over and Lara will be in the background also taking a look at our chat window. So like she already explained, if there is anything you would like to ask, go ahead, do it. We basically want to gather all the questions and answer them at the very end. But if there is going to be something which is directly presented on the right now, I can also interrupt and try to answer immediately. So the most of today's webinar will be live. So I'm going to start our products and show a couple of new things. But before that, I wanted to go a little bit in the past and tell you a story of where actually RayPack went through and how the product now is being changed in this new RayPack Studio 7.x line. So we at RayNet, we do not only develop RayPack Studio, we do not only publish the product, we also are service providers. We do services, we do consulting. We have a lot of packaging projects, and certainly through years, 20 or so, we've been doing a lot of packages, like thousands, many thousands, several thousands of them. And this is great. It's like a powerful user base. Our colleagues which are using our product to give us a simple feedback, like, how do you like what we do? What do you still need? What is missing in the product? Where can we improve it? And as such, we tend to say that it's a product made for packagers, but also made by packagers, and also included the input from them, which makes it even more kind of awkward or to some degree maybe even embarrassing. So especially around as MSIX has been announced, so like already 3 years ago, and as the first version of that was public in our product, we asked them, so what do you think? How do you like? And the answer was kind of interesting, but also giving a lot of inspiration and thoughts to us. So the answer was like, well, you know, it's great. Obviously, MSI we have been doing that for years now. MSIX, but there are so many different projects where it actually doesn't fit for what is needed right now, right away. Like we do a lot of scripting, we do a lot of wrapping, we even try to avoid repackaging, and as such, formats like MSI or MSIX are not that widely used, so to say, and even they are not even more than preferred than just giving a spin, trying to install a setup from a vendor silently with some command line switches. So we took a look, and here are a couple of figures. Your mileage might vary. These projects that we took for this analysis were like from a project with like hundreds or few hundred packages to a few thousands. And we took a look of how many of them are going in which directions. And obviously, not only of them were typical flat desktop client packaging, some of them were VDI. And about the sector, it was banking, e-commerce, and retail sector. So again, your mileage might vary. But for us, important to see was that we do not do that much repackaging these days. So in the sample that we had, 30% of them, of all the packages that we did, were already vendor MSI. So far so good. You just simply take it, create a transform, then publish into RMS, SCCM, Intune, and you are good to go. When MSI is not an option, there is nothing from the vendor, pretty much our opinion on that was to repackage, and that has been like through years now. But again, coming back to our story, that kind of repackaging is now getting less and less important, and people try to even avoid it unless it's really required by the technological platform you're going from. Like if you go to MSIX, obviously you need to repackage. If you go to Citrix at Layering, you need to repackage. But what about classical deployment? Whether it's Intune or SCCM, you can also go the safe way by not doing that. But we didn't have answer for that, and that brought us to the question, so what is really needed? As you can see, most of the setups that our colleagues are reported to be doing were non-MSI setups coming from the vendor, like almost 50% of them. And we then asked them, right, but what do you normally do? Like, if there is an exit to be started, obviously exit doesn't offer that many customization options. There may be something like install it silently or disable auto updates from command line, but it's not a rule. It's not standard. And most of them are to be described as simple, where you just only install something pretty quick, get it with silent command line switch, maybe remove a shortcut, but do not do anything else. And the rest, like 20% of altogether, all packages might be considered as complex. But whether complex really means super difficult, this is like something which depends on the use case. It might be, for example, that there is something more complex to be done, like some initial profile configuration, disabling of pop-ups. Normally, it's more like research, but still we consider them as more than one liner to install. So it seems that 20% of the apps are like causing most of the efforts, and 80% of them are pretty easy, whether it's MSI or simple vendor setup. Now, interesting part is that MSIX hasn't been that much popular, and for the US project, it might be slightly different and higher number. And these projects here, well, they were just so much lower in the numbers, but still, we currently think it might be also having the same route, like trying to avoid repackaging, trying to avoid going through that path at all costs, where MSIX obviously doesn't allow you any different choice. You cannot just start your setup. So what is actually typically being done during, so to say, setup wrapping? Well, you always definitely want to get it silent. You want to install your product. You don't want any annoying pop-ups, confirmation, interaction with the user. So that's the first point. If there is a way, you just try to automate it with silent switches /s, q, or whatever like. And if it's not possible, well, probably in that case, you would go and repackage. So using the classic approach. The deleting shortcuts, that's also a typical task. So these days, desktop and taskbar are considered to be like private user sphere. So it's up to user to shape it, it's up to user to pin, it's up to the user to create shortcuts to some commonly used features. And as such, many of packaging guidelines are encouraging or even telling us to disable them. So start menu, obviously, it's a different story. The cleanup routine, it might be that your setup creates some initial, say, database for the user, or does something which you don't want, installs too many plugins and stuff like that. So like removing kind of destructive approach to what your original setup did, it's another typical activity that that is commonly to be done during setup wrapping. Turning off auto updates, yeah. Since we are talking about a deployment, we don't want the app to be automatically updated on its phone. We just want to have it managed, which means we practically, in all kind of apps, tend to switch this off to make sure it doesn't happen. Whether it's a registry or XML, INI, JSON, that's another story. So definitely not standardized activity. And then some extra content, like putting maybe extra plugins, extra license, or whatever is needed to fulfill business purposes. Last three are not that much common, but still to be found in a few projects that we had, like setting permissions. There are obviously some better ways to do that. You can completely rely this to your deployment platform or to native Windows capabilities, but also a few setups were having this kind of issues, that some folder needed to be open for modifications, and as such, it had been bundled with the package. So not really a recommendation, but happens. Then the active setup. It's an undocumented feature of Windows, but currently pretty widely used to quickly set up user profile. If there's no other way, like using MSI advertised shortcuts, for example. So also there are apps which rely on that technology to make sure that the user has his profile. Again, there are tons of different options how to make sure your user profile are owned and set up correctly, but still there are also packages which happen to do that. So that's another point which happens. And then finally, it's just prepping the app. So like installing, configuring, maybe even starting, taking a look what the app does on the first launch, and then going back and making sure it's neutral again. So hopefully that it's again setting everything up on its first run. So this is what typically is being done, but the order was not random here. We currently estimate that like first 3 points. So like just get it installed, delete shortcuts, and make some small cleanup of program files or app data. And maybe with turning off auto updates, this is like 85% of cases. So normally, again, it's the place where you spend most of the time. And the other stuff are not that much constantly happening. So they are more like on occasions to be done, but usually it's just for about the first 3 or 4 points. And this was a good feedback for us. So like we had RayPack already covered from the vendor MSI side, so like pack designer, editing MSIs. The MSIX has been already for some time around, and now we decided to go into the middle part, like how do we address these concerns? Now, all this reasoning can be actually put together into these 4 statements. So, and this was actually our starting point in finding out what to do and how to do. First of all, the packaging, the repackaging, the typical one where you do with snapshots or with monitoring, where you determine what's the difference between 2 different states of the machine. In any case, it's something which is, first of all, time consuming. So you need to have your clean environment, start, set up, repackage. Obviously, takes time and resources. And many people try to speed it up. Many people try to actually avoid it just because of that costly setup and that costly total cost of ownership. Like if you repackage, you kind of take responsibility for that. So that's another point. If there is a setup and the vendor of the setup knows exactly what happens, he does know exactly like how to migrate your data, where to write it, and stuff like that. Why to be clever? Why to be trying to pretend more clever than a vendor? Why to reinvent the wheel? Why to even do some reverse engineering? And as such, even in case of like products which are already in MSI but kind of wrapped in some setup exe, it might be that there's some extra logic or bootstrapping which you really don't want to take responsibility for. And given the fact that setups these days are getting even better and better, so like there are pretty much almost no cases where there is no silent setup, and the enterprise features and customization are also being there. It means that we normally accept that kind of lack of flexibility and maybe relying on the vendor. And what we win is the speed. What we win is like being sure that it just works the way the vendor wants it. So again, not to take the responsibility. So speed. About the speed, if you imagine a new product, new update comes, and you want to get it deployed fast, if you go the repackage way, there is a lot of things to be done during packaging, but even more to be done on the testing side. Because essentially speaking, the repackaged copy could have already like maybe have too few resources or too many resources, which affects again how the product works, and maybe something is broken during that process. So by doing that, again, we take time, we have to test, we need to observe some different edge cases, and with just simply doing this from the vendor, it's just a faster process, and again, potentially speaking with less issues, less troubles doing that. And the final point is about the updates themselves. So if you repackage to any format and a new version comes, then you essentially speaking have to go through the same process again over and over. So even if the update is minimum set of changes, you need to repackage, you need to ensure it's properly upgraded, maybe avoid the same mistakes or repeat the same mistakes, who knows. And in case of software wrapping, where you just simply take existing setup, in most cases, it's just about let's switch the file with a newer version, have it started. In most cases, it has absolutely the same command line and just a few different metadata. And as such, it's much faster again to go through that route. So all of them brought us to the answer. So how this is solved today. It's also something which we based our efforts on in some recent releases of RayPack, and also it seems to be getting more and more commonly used. Back in years, the companies tend to have their own complicated setup wrappers, framework, toolkits to just bring the software on the desktop. And these days, many of them actually turned into a technology called PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit. For those of you who didn't use that yet, it's an open source and free toolkit, a bunch of scripts, functions, and methods for a general purpose deployment. So it's not really about some specific format. You can pretty much deploy whatever you like in Windows, whatever is possible. And that set of functions is oriented towards some typical mechanics, like working with the system, the file system, registry, updates, Windows Update, SCCM, and some other stuff. So everything and all the goodies that PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit offers. The good thing about that is, well, it's standard, so to say. So more and more projects are using that, and there is pretty easy learning curve if you have already experience with the toolkit. There are plenty of functions. It's extendable. You can also build your own modules. It's PowerShell based, so if you love PowerShell, you'll love it. It has really no dependencies other than PowerShell. It's also standalone, so literally you can just take the wrapped setup on every single computer. No additional like agents or runtimes and stuff are needed other than what Windows pretty much already has out of the box. And it's upgrade friendly, so it splits the engine from the logic, and as such, if there is something new coming, updates or bug fixes, you just throw away the previous engine, plug in the new one, and the package hopefully still works. On the other hand, if something works with current version, you might not need to update, and then you are guaranteed to have no breaking changes due to some additional changes in the toolkit. And this is what made the toolkit so popular. In RayPack, we had already PSADT support since a few releases. Pretty simple to get with a simple setup converted from MSI or from XZ. And this turned out to be not quite enough because of the reasons I just mentioned, like how to make additional customization, how to make it in some managed way, and yet ideally without programming, which definitely PowerShell scripting would be. Additional issue with the toolkit is that while it's absolutely super awesome, it has a lot of features, it has a bunch of modules and stuff, but it's also really verbose. Like a script for a simple setup can be having few hundred lines of code, like default hello world would be 300 lines, while essentially speaking what you really care are 2 or 3 of them. So like putting an Eiffel Tower and then a man standing next to him would be the proportion what you need versus what the toolkit really brings. So about that verbosity, it's somehow a difficult topic. And this was also one of the bullet points we wanted to solve. So having said that, let's go to the feature highlights. This was the state before our 7x line, and we aim to answer these questions and to come up with something which would close the bridge, to close the gap. To close the gap, that would actually mean we have a product where we do not force the user to work with some specific technology, MSI or MSIX, or maybe scripting, wrapping, Citrix or FV. We just put them all together into one box. And obviously, if at some point you want to migrate from one to another, it's a pretty simple story, similar universal workflow, and we just leave it up to you, the transition. So today, maybe PSADT, tomorrow MSIX, why not? So what we're going to cover now, soon in the live demo, would be how RayPack 7.1 allows you to make setup wrapping, so PSADT, right. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples, but also how convenient is that, and what is so much unique about approach we did with our product. There will be a couple of MSIX enhancements, specifically for MSIX app-attached users. We have a support for SIM format, so it's like next to the VHD, which is available on board. Also, a big point, partially connected to the story with PSADT, is that we can now use RayPack to convert any package in any format to Intune, and also give this flexibility to like adjust that middle layer, like add the customization, add your branding, set or delete a registry, and stuff like that. So all of this can be then converted, whatever the input format is, MSI or XZ. The Windows 11 is out there, so we also have support for that, especially about our component RayPC Advanced, which is used for compatibility testing. And at the end, we'll be talking about some point RayPack Express. I'm not going to explain too much about that. You will see, but it's also some cool news to the RayPack Studio ecosystem.
Some surprise.
Some surprise. All right. So let's now switch to the live demo. I'm going to jump to my PC. Just a moment. All right, so we should be now ready to go. One thing that is pretty interesting about our release is that we added an MSIX support for our product. So this actually has been there for quite a while, but if you now try to use our product install for the first time, you have now a choice. You may go either with the MSI installer or with a native MSIX approach. So fully supported by us, coming directly from the vendor, and I think it's a good way to go. So since RayPack offers MSIX, and MSIX being really a future, it's a great technology. So why not to operate natively at that as MSIX? So just make sure to check it out. It's absolutely cool. I'm only actually using MSIX these days, so upgrading and stuff is so much nicely done. And all our core components currently are supporting this. So I have already RayPack started in the background. Let's try to have a look at this. As a short demo during this webinar, I'm going to show a couple of approaches how we made RayPack 7.1 even better in terms of what setup wrapping is. But let's maybe start with a point which we already had in some previous versions. So like quickly create a wrapper. So a setup wrapper in which we are just simply going to pull something in and get an output, which would be the PS80 toolkit. So for that, I'm going to go through the pack wrapper wizard and let's try to find out my source. We can take, for example, KeepAs, which is an executable. It's not an MSI. And if I take KeepAs as saying it's my source, I want to bring this product into my computer, it will pull a couple of properties from my setup, so we can just adjust them or for a time being live with the default values. And one of the interesting points here is that RayPack was already able to determine how to silently install it. So like with SP, very silent, no restart. This will be the way to set up KeepAs and get rid of all the dialogues. This is based on the algorithm which detects the setup type. So there are a lot of them which we also support, from inner setup to null-soft setups. And many popular software can be already quickly at that point determined, all right, so here is how to install it silently. I don't have to Google it or Bing it to get my command line switches. So going next, here is one important addition which we've been doing and we added into RayPack 7.1. You can now directly go into Intune. So since I just decided on what my parameters are, which product is that, and how to install it silently, if I select the option Intune package, I'm going to get a ready-to-use Intune Win package, which can be then pushed directly to your Intune. So it will also wrap all the necessary setups. In case of MSI, it could be also MSD, any supporting files, cat files, the command line, all of this will be in one single bundle, which is enough what you need to get your app running in Intune. Again, the input format as such doesn't matter that much. But I'm going to, I'm not going to cover this right now. Intune will be also interesting to see from another perspective in a few minutes. So for the time being, let's stick to PowerShell edit from a toolkit and just simply go through the wizard, accept, and this is going to produce something which looks along these lines. So there is just a single entry point called deploy application exe, and it's just enough to start this exe to have your setup started. run silently with all the setups. There is obviously also the setup file over there, and all the logic is contained within the PS1. And obviously, this is what I was also meaning just a minute before. The verbosity is not that kind of good in PS80, but if you have already some experience with PowerShell, you will pretty much be able to locate quickly what's going on. If you don't like PowerShell, you will be really happy to see what we have in RayPack for you. So let's take a look. Back to RayPack. Let's just simply finish the wizard. We can see quickly what RayPack did. And right now, interesting point is that what I'm currently editing is not an MSI or MST, but it's directly a PS1. So that's the file which I just opened in Visual Studio Code. And by doing so, I can just simply go through all various tabs and items to see the visual representation of what this setup does. So I can see it has my setup file, KeePath setup. If I go to the install section, that's going to be exactly the only single thing that I care about in my setup. So in that case, it's just simply calling the vendor setup.exe with a couple of parameters which RayPack determined automatically, and that's pretty much it. So it's nothing fancy, but it saves so much time to locate this instead of browsing through thousands and hundreds of lines of code. Now, what about customization? What about that copy of KeePath requires, I don't know, an active setup or registry key, or maybe something different? So for that, there's a bunch of ready-to-use items, ready-to-use actions. Most of them are pretty much self-explaining. So you could like work with files and folders, try to copy a directory, copy a file. You could use some basic logic, and it's pretty much new in RayPack 7.1. So if and else's are pretty much supported, you could build up a condition, for example, install my runtime, but only if it's missing. So pretty easy to use. You can work with registry and active setup, or do some other stuff, including the installation of MSI, executables, unpacking, downloading, and also working with ini files. The good thing about PS80T, I was referring to in the beginning, was that it's extendable. And a lot of users are actually even building their own functions next to what the PS80T offers as its base. And RayPack does one thing which actually allows you to fulfill that. If I go, for example, to this place, the execute function, it's basically a placeholder for everything that PS80T offers to you. So you can see all the actions, all methods and functions which the current PS80T template has. For example, I could check maybe if PowerPoint is started. So like selecting test PowerPoint. And there is some simple help shown from RayPack, like what this function does, if it has parameters, what these parameters have. So I could just simply set this to and save it for some future, has PowerPoint. And also let me add another one. Also something simple like we can, for example, test if some update is installed. So test MSC update. And update would be maybe 1, 2, 3. So something pretty random. So this is a parameter which usually would be just programmed by hand, but here there is some help. So showing what it's doing, in many cases, what is expected here, what kind of format, what the method does, and obviously, if you write your own function, RayPack will be able to handle this and show, hey, it's your function doing that and that. Now you may question, right, but what if I want to have even more flexibility? What if I, basically speaking, I don't have too much against writing my code, but I just want to have it like better visualized, like using this view. And that's something completely new in our product. You can switch to something which is called the advanced view, in which case what I see now visually, what I just did with my keyboard and mouse by just putting a few entries over there, I can now switch to advanced view where I can see actually the code. And this is what I've been just kind of programming with my mouse. So all the methods like starting a process, the KeePath with all these parameters, and checking if PowerPoint is there or whether the updates are there, it's all in my script. even more cool thing is that what if you, like I said, want to program something? Well, we basically speaking allow this. So if I now write hello world, obviously this method doesn't exist, but let's just use it for some purposes like hello world with parameter foo and bar. And if I do this from the code side and switch back to the visual designer, as you can see, it has been all visualized. So again, if you love programming, you get some decent visual overview of what your PowerShell code, what your PSADT is doing. If you don't kind of like PowerShell, you can just simply drag and drop, use a couple of functions, and all of them will be then represented in your PSADT file. So in that case, my hello world function has been set with the foo and bar. There are some even more interesting use cases, like we added some new support for if and else condition. I could actually quickly go through that. If I put some if and then, well, condition, let's try to figure it out what RayPack offers. I guess I defined a few variables called has PowerPoint and has update. So there is some help from RayPack telling me what I can use. So let's just simply take one of them, has update. Okay, and in that case, maybe I want to drag and drop something and put it here. So that means execute some function hello world, but only if my update has been installed. Well, obviously, as you may guess, if we go back, this is properly represented in PowerShell, and that's exactly what was our goal with that approach. So switching between visual and advanced designer, but also that we don't have any particular project format for that. You can open any kind of PS1. It doesn't even have to be, produced with RayPack. It can be your standard PSADT template or package that you already have on your drive. And in that case, RayPack just simply visualize your content. So there are some installation, uninstallation, and the repair steps. All of them are also having a visual representation over here in the menu. And they can also switch through different like pre and post steps, which give you even more flexibility, like defining the reboot behavior and some other stuff. And all of this available visually from that view.
Arjun, we got really good feedback about this function, and I think the most important question at the moment is, when is this feature available? So yeah, if you have RayPack, you can update right now because we released this version already. And if you need RayPack Studio, you can contact us at every time. So you can do it right now.
Yeah, so it's correct. So during this webinar, I'm showing a version which has been already for some time available. And and we are going to talk about the availability later on. You can just simply go and grab it, and that function is simply there. So it's public stuff I'm showing currently. Okay, this is a wizard which I started. It's a project which I started in the wizard, but obviously you can open existing PS1, or you can even start from scratch. Like there is one single function which I personally really love. If I start a new empty project, which is going to be now PS1 format, with the template or PSADT version you would like to use, if you create a new project, and obviously now it's empty, there is some default icon, no files, no actions. And now let me import a new file. For example, well, we already took some exe, so this time let's take an MSI file. And if you import it, so RayPack knows whether it's exe or MSI, knows how to install or repair or uninstall the setup. And if you accept the prompt, what you'll get is already a ready-to-use definition, which has the MSI installer set up and bootstrap for you. Obviously, the repair is there, the uninstall. So all of this already in place. And now the only thing for you is to maybe do some extra stuff, or maybe not. In many cases, it's more than enough just to have your setup started quickly and silently. If you need an MSG transform for that, well, go ahead, open up Pack Designer, and obviously the transform can be easily created out of there. So this automatic creation of command line, this automatic creation of actions, but also ability to switch between the visual designer and advanced designer is one of the key highlights of this release. So we wanted to make it extremely easy for people to jump into PS80 world, even if they are not willing to really program. So just drag and drop is more than enough. And for professional users, having an ability to like see a visual structure of your setup, and also being able to use all the functions, including the custom ones from your toolkit, that was our goal. And this is what currently RayPack 7.1, this is the functionality RayPack 7.1 allows you to do. I mentioned that you can use your own custom template for that. And since RayPack has been already for like, ages, allowing you to use profiles, you can even say for profile A, for customer A, I want to use some specific template, from customer B, something different. And RayPack respects your choice. So whatever you create with that functionality will automatically get your current template the way you define that. All right, so that will be pretty much how easy it is to work with the new pack wrapper and PS80 editor. In many cases, you could even make it easier, like going back to the use case I was telling in the beginning, how to get the software quickly. Reddit is also something which is not really directly connected, but still reusing the same technology, and that will be the package store. I guess we've been already presenting that in some of the previous webinars, but in case you haven't tried, my recommendation would be to give it a try, that you can go to our package store where we have a list of packages which are curated, so like with all the options that each setup is offering, including custom app-specific ones, where you can quickly get your PS80 with MSI or XZ, depending on your setup type, and that's going to be then fully automated without even you thinking like, so what do I need? Is it registry or is it an XML file? We take it over. So if I do it maybe quickly for like one of the first apps on the list, let's just try to test how 7-zip works. We can download the sources automatically from the vendor side, or we use some local ones if you have. But I just want to make it pretty quick at this point, and what I really care about are the options. So let's just try to download. I have my internet is there, or it's just some internal. Well, it takes some time, but okay. At the end, the 7-zip has been now downloaded, and now it's a bit different approach. Instead of thinking, so is it registry I need or XML? You just say, I want to be able to install per machine. I don't want any reboot. I want to handle them on my own. I don't want the interaction in add remove programs. That's something that makes anyway no sense in the enterprise world. And then this is something which is specific to this app. So each app would be different at that point. In 7-zip, we can like choose which files will be by default handled by that. So if I select maybe just 7-zip with language files, but without custom installation directory, if I accept that and go through the wizard, I would actually be now in a place which is already kind of familiar. So let's try to have a look. There is a PS80, again, the same entry point, now with MSI and MST combination. And as you may guess, I can open it with RayPack and again see what package store did for me, which files are there, which configuration, and stuff like that. So this concludes our PS80 story. I really encourage you to give it a try, and also let us know what you think about, and I hope that you'll like it. There are a couple of other points I wanted to cover that we also did in that release. Staying at RayPack, we have now some extra enhancements for MSIX users. Like I said, if you open, do I have anything here? If you open some MSIX setup, you can go to the file menu, the build, and build direct from here the app attach volumes, which have been there already as VHD format. Now the sim one is a new. It's still kind of experimental in terms of the MSIX app attach, but already available from our product. So whether you like the classic VHD or sim, you are good covered by it's good covered by RayPack. We also extended a couple of PSF plugins. So getting some better compatibility or fixing few issues which some legacy apps may have is now even more easier. So like with registry or files redirection, you can configure them from the fix-up place. And also in terms of our Windows 11 support, in many places in RayPack, we also target Windows 11, where, for example, you can select your dependency to be Windows 11, or you can test your setups against Windows 11. And for that, I will quickly open one of our components, the RayQC Advanced, where you have a full overview of what currently can be tested. And one of these new additions into RayPack is ability to test against for Windows 11, and also consequently to Windows Server 2020 is also on that list. So there are a bunch of informations and user guide and also in-app help give some good overview of what could be tested. And I could maybe quickly look and start some really quick tests without even going too much over the library, without starting the overall complicated migration process. Let's just try to quickly test some ad hoc package. So with operating system conflicts, maybe without conflicts. So just some basic generic tests. I should have some example here, for example, that one. And I'm going to choose Windows 11 as my target system. So then this will go and test against MSIX, against Windows 11, and I guess there was something also on that list, or not, just MSIX and Windows 11. And then I'm going to get my report. RayQC Advanced also gives me a way to fix a couple of issues which might be found, specifically about conflict with operating systems, some bad practices and stuff like that. For my setup, I see no errors, there are a few warnings, so it's good. It means it should run without issues on MSIX or Windows 11 together. And for whatever is now shown on the list, I could either decide to either accept that, like some API call which might be called but is marked as deprecated on Windows 11, or in another case, for example, there is like some component which mixes user and machine stuff, which is not that kind of good idea to run on Windows 11, in which case I could, for example, say, let's fix it. So then after going next, RayQC Advanced will fix the issue for me. So this is like what the Windows 11 rule set is doing. You can go into, like I said, in-app help and read some extra information about what is being tested and how to work around some different issues which might be reported. If you get a full report from RayQC Advanced, you also get that information. So not only what was the issue, but also how to fix that. It's also there in the product. And you can also build some like library of apps, have them also tested conflicts with each other, and combined with Windows 11 compatibility, you get the overall picture of your portfolio. So to wrap up some of the important additions, there are a bunch of improvements, like to make it easier to work with the product. I just wrote a couple of them, but release note contains even more information, so you'll find them on our websites and also in our announcements. Most of them are simple, but yet somewhat beloved. For example, if you use RayEval, you can now invoke a searching and then navigating through your steps. For example, finding which steps has a download text, which is just much easier. So you don't have to like jump through all the steps, even if the documentation for your setup is complex. So that's small addition, but saves a lot of time and makes it easier to work with the product. Or how, in case of RayQC, the checklist tool. The checklist tool, as a frequently requested feature from our users, we added an option to run a checklist from some particular element. So not to rerun the whole, but maybe only restart where the last point failed. So now this option is also available from the UI and also saves some few unnecessary clicks So this also makes this product a little bit better. More features, more changes, and also a complete overview of what also has been done in RayPack Studio 7.1 to make it faster, but also like cover more and more different use cases, and Pack Wrapper and PS82 would be just one of them. Like I said, please take a look at our release notes. You'll find a lot of information over there. So now this concludes our live demo, but we have still a few minutes to do a Q&A session, and I can obviously stay at this screen if there is something I can also show, depending on do we have anything now from this round.
Yes, good idea, because we have several questions. And the first one is there support to execute a PowerShell script in post-installation in PS80T?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I go back to my, I think this was some project one. So there is a switch between install, pre-install, and post-install, and you can just simply use this dropdown to show a bit different overview. For pre-install, there are some built-in functions which PS80 starts always, but obviously you can add your own, and it's the same story going back and forth between visual and advanced designer is absolutely possible.
Perfect. The next question is regarding RayEval. So is there any plan to update RayEval with the GUI project editor rather than having to design projects via the XML?
It's one of the features which we have on our backlog. While I cannot give now an estimate for that, whether it comes in the next release, but we know it's important, and we are currently looking for how to solve it, just to again make the product a little bit better without too much configuration over XML. So it's a valid point, and we'll just announce it separately when it comes into the product.
Okay. So yes, feel free to ask your questions. We are happy to answer them. So there's one other. Will it work with custom PS80T?
Yeah, so I guess the question was, will it work with custom PS80T? I guess, so the question probably is about whether the user is able to like switch the PS80T toolkit to something different. I mean, newer version, or maybe just something custom with a branding. Yeah, it's possible. So I have already mentioned that this app is like profile based, and for each profile you can define a different toolkit wrapper. Now this is actually something which looks like a standard toolkit. So if I go to my place where everything is stored, technically speaking, you can just simply replace that content with whatever version of toolkit you're using, and RayPack will be happy to work with that. By default, we are delivering with RayPack 7.1 the version, if I recall correctly, 3.8.3, or I need to check, but the newest version at the time of the release. And if there is a need to like work with some newer version or update, it's something which each user can do on his own, and you don't really have to like wait for Reddit to pick up. It's super easy just to replace the folder.
Okay, now we have a very interesting question. So NSIX is a big topic. What do you think for the future?
So my personal feeling is NSIX is the way to go for the future. It's a great technology, although many apps today might still have some issues with that, so granted that. But other than that, especially if you're thinking about the app attach and virtual desktop, it's something to really to consider. So for app attach, it's just for the time being the only way to go. But also some different features of MSIX are super interesting, like byte level differencing, like ability to clean up after removing the product, so not leaving traces, clean install, clean uninstall. So they really make the technology great. Now, like I said, we try to keep RayPack, so to say, generic purpose. So you can go and work with MSIX and RayPack. We try to keep up with the technology, with the new announcements, with the new features, and yet we are not forcing you to go this way. You can certainly use RayPack to start slowly, maybe for the time being. Right now, there is a need to use PSADT, which will then transform to MSIX in some nearest or later future. And switch with RayPack would be easier. It's just a one UI, one framework, and one approach to the topic. So as an active player in MSIX and MSIX market, we keep up. And whether you keep up, it's up to you. We just make it convenient for you to use any format you like and make it as convenient as possible to move to the new format when you're ready. So that would be how I think the MSIX and RayPack story would play.
Yes, so there are no further questions, but imagine, I think we have one more slide for the big surprise for the market.
Yes, now having answered the questions, there is one little thing which we wanted to show on the end, and that's the story about RayPack Express. Now, if you go to Microsoft Store and look up, just give it a moment, and look up RayPack, you'll find that RayPack is now natively available in Microsoft Store. You can download it. The Express edition, which you can activate after installing, is completely free. So you can use it to test RayPack, but also to cover your basic packaging needs. Like it allows you to work with MSIX, with MSI, and some other topics. If at some point you decide you need some more enterprise features, for example, but not limited to working with virtual machines, Citrix, AppV, and stuff, you can easily upgrade to any higher edition, but the base one stays more or less free. Go to our RayNetD website or to Microsoft Store to find out more. And we just think that giving away a free edition of RayPack for you to use to solve some daily challenges is great. And also we would like to get your feedback, what you think about. So it's available live. You can even do it now and grab RayPack 7.1 for your own for your own purposes. We will try to also do the same for some next products in around. So stay and try to be following us on our social media to know more when we are ready with that. Some more new cool news are to be coming soon.
That's true. Okay, perfect. So we are done with the presentation. Thanks a lot for your time. And if you have some questions, need support, so contact us at every time. And yeah, have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.